Hello, everybody. We are here with I'm Vanessa, and we are here with Mr. Jomo Kwame Sundaram. He's an expert in the international economy and has a really broad experience background, such as in renowned universities, research centers, also in the Malaysian government, and especially in the UN and other international organizations. So, welcome to Mondopoli, Mr. Sundaram. And international economics is the actual topic that we would like to focus on, especially from the perspective of the global south.
Thank you very much for inviting me to speak to you. The major problem is that right now we are going blindly into a depression. The economic growth prospects for the near future are not very good. And we have two big major problems. One, of course, is the raising of interest rates, which will further slow down the world economy. And this raising of interest rates is completely unnecessary. But once the US Federal Reserve Bank does that, everybody has to follow. This will make debt very, very unsustainable. Many developing countries in the global south have borrowed quite a bit in recent years, especially with Western interest rates being relatively low. The second major problem, of course, is the war. Not only the hot war in Ukraine, but also the new Cold War has involved increasing use of economic sanctions, not only affecting trade, but all types of other financial economic transactions between countries. The result of this combination will be also to slow the economy. I think it's important to remember the bubble economy in the West during the 1920s, which was followed, of course, by the Great Depression. We have a different combination now, but it's a very, very dangerous combination, which will set back conditions for people. Already, for example, since the middle of the last decade, less and less people have become more food secure. And now, with the disruption of the trade, or with the disruption of fuel supplies, food supplies, and fertilizer supplies, this will be further set back. Similarly, we have seen increased concentration of wealth and an accompanying inequality, which is not going to help at all. So we have the real possibility of a repeat of what happened during the 1980s, a relatively mild recession in the US can cause huge implications for the rest of the world, especially for the global south. It's much more indebted now than it was at the beginning of the 1980s.
Thank you, Mr. Sundaram. So we could say that these were the main risks of the international setting as of now. What can we say about the priorities of the political choices?
Unfortunately, most developing countries, especially the smaller ones, have very, very limited political choices. For example, up to the 1970s, sub-Saharan African economies were net food exporters. Today, sub-Saharan economies are net food importers. African economies cannot even afford, cannot produce the food which they need for their own populations. They are extremely vulnerable, but they also have very little else to export. Of course, many governments in the global south have been enabled to become corrupt, have been facilitated by international financial arrangements to be corrupt. They have taken out money. So the opening of what is called the opening of the capital account has meant that money has flowed out of developing countries. We cannot expect in an emergency situation for that money to flow back. Climate finance has been promised for a decade and a half, but very little has actually been delivered. And so developing countries, many of which are in the tropical and subtropical zone, are going to be very, very vulnerable as the situation deteriorates. In this part of the world, for example, we have had 3 years of La Nina, and now it's going to be followed by 3 years of El Nino. Severe droughts, which are going to adversely affect food production and the livelihoods of farmers. But with the reversal of globalization, which we have seen in recent years, this situation means that developing countries which have become much more externally oriented cannot be effectively externally oriented because they are now going to be deprived of opportunities to enter new markets, for example, the US market or even European markets.
Thank you for sharing very much, Mr. Sundaram.